Hey friends, Ryan Brown. I'm super excited to have a special guest with me today. Typically, my intros are very short and we just kind of get into it, but this man deserves a much longer introduction.
Please do not read my whole bio.
And I just want to honor him. I'm not going to read the whole bio, I promise. But today I got U.S. Congressman Brian Mast, who is a U.S. representative for the Florida's 21st Congressional District, and has been serving as congressman since 2017. Just for some context, the district reaches from kind of like the Fort Pierce area to North Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter, West, and everywhere in between. Our office is in his district and also my home. Most of our clients and realtors as well are in his district as well. Prior to his election to Congress, he served for the U.S. Army for 12 years, held the rank of Staff Sergeant. Congressman has awarded multiple medals, including Bronze Star Medal, Army Medal of Valor. Can't even pronounce that one.
Messes people up every time. Army Commendation Medal.
Commendation. The Purple Heart, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. While deployed in Afghanistan, he works as a bomb disposal expert under the Elite Joint Special Operations Command. Last improvised device he found resulted in catastrophic injuries, which included loss of his legs. After his recovery at Walter Reed, he continued aiding the counterterrorism and national defense as an explosive specialist with the Department of Homeland Security. In 2016, ran for office, became our elected official. But what I really love about this guy is that he is a loving husband to Brianna, a caring father of 4 kids, good friend, ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Mast.
No mention that I'm your client. Right?
And he's a client.
That's right.
Been a client for many years, yes.
You've done great work for me. If I needed a mortgage, I would come to you because you do a great job.
That's right. If you have any mortgage questions or want to know about the market,
that's right.
Call me. Yeah. So my wife knows, like, if you're calling me like at 9 o'clock at night, I'm like, oh, it's Congressman. Got to take it.
Thank your wife for me.
But thank you so much. I mean, thanks for coming in, spending the time today. And thank you for your service to our great country, too.
Thanks. I loved it. Service was the time of my life. I'd still be doing it today as a member of the military. Just wasn't in the cards anymore.
So let's talk about that. Tell me a little bit about, when you got out of the Army, like, what was that whole transition like?
Well,
because you always hear about, like, veterans when they get out of the Army, that it's so tough to transition and they deal with, like, depression and everything else.
Some do, some don't. My transition a little bit different than many. So I was injured September 19th, 2010, bomb tech, as you mentioned, serving in Afghanistan, lost 2 legs and a finger. So for the last year of my time in the military, I was in a military hospital, essentially, Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., surrounded by, at that time, in 2010, 11, 12, those kind of years, very, very heavy period of fighting in our war on terror. There was, many of those months, 50, 60, 70 men and women a month waking up in very similar conditions to my own, traumatic head injuries, amputations, blind, burned, combination of all of the above. And I got to tell you, for the vast majority of individuals that I crossed paths with in recovery, yeah, we were broken down to a certain extent physically because of the toll that war took on us, but those individuals across the board became stronger individuals than they were prior to injury, no matter what it was that they did in the military or what branch of the military that they were in. I saw people just become the absolute best versions of themselves. And, so I had that amazing peer group around me, encouraging me each and every day, from people that had been injured a year or two before me to people that were just being newly injured and inspiration on all sides of it at all stages. And then, of course, all of the other people just out in the military doing great work, operating, doing incredible things that were my peers also. And so the thing that I tell folks that I think is difficult about military transition is this. And I call it kind of the Ed Bundy, Al Bundy, not Ed Bundy, right? Ed Bundy, was that a serial killer? Yeah, not Ed Bundy, Al Bundy. Al Bundy, the old Married with Children's show. So he always went around in that show and he always referenced like his last throw as a high school quarterback and, it was the greatest throw and touchdown and this kind of thing. And you can't go through life just thinking that the best thing that you do is in your past, right? I can't go through life thinking that my job was defending my country. The best defense I gave to my country was that day back in 2010 serving in Afghanistan. Or, the best example I ever set for my kids was this time, a decade ago in the military or something like that. You have to wake up every day and know and believe and make sure that the best is in front of you, the best example, the best defense, the best whatever it is that you define yourself in. And so how do you replicate your worth as a member of the military in the civilian world? How do you replicate that you hold the lives of your friends and the lives of your enemies in your hands and still make sure that the best is in front of you? That is extremely difficult. And I think that's where the military exit struggle comes. It's not that we haven't done great things that we're proud of. It's how do we continue to find that purpose moving forward?
Yep. And for you, that's how you transitioned into public service? Is that?
Yeah. I'm laying in a hospital bed and obviously suffered traumatic injuries, had tubes coming out of me, what they called wound vacuums on the end of each one of my limbs on my left arm. My left arm at that time was actually sewn to my stomach. That's a different story. One of the most uncomfortable things I've ever had in my life. It's how they saved my pinky, was by sewing it inside of my belly, essentially. And so I was uncomfortable, and I'm laying there in that bed trying to figure out what's next. Am I ever going to be able to throw a baseball with my son? I had one son at the time. He was 6 months old. Is my wife going to love me? There was never a second thought for her, right? But for me, these are things, going through my head. And as I'm doing that, I'm sitting there and my family's visiting me. My father's visiting me. And he says, Brian, you can't let the best defense, going back to what I just said, can't let the best defense you give your country be something in your past. The best example for your kids. You can't let it be in your past. You got to make sure that's in your future. And it stuck with me. It's one of the reasons I mentioned it. And so thinking about that, I said, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, my job is defense. What's my next battlefield going to be? Well, you know what? My next battlefield is going to be one of words and ideas and policy for our country, direction for our country, if my community will have me. And I thought about doing that as I was laying there with tubes coming out of me. And being a good military guy, I developed a plan of attack. And I came up with my plan of attack for doing it. I executed that plan of attack over the next couple of years, and the community said, okay, we'll let you do it.
Love it. So did you have thoughts of that before, or you literally came up with the thoughts?
No, I was a lifer in the military. So I did about 12 years in the military. I was in our highest level of special operations. Loved it. I would have stayed there. Like I said, I would be there to this day doing what I love to do. I was at the peak of my career doing that. So I hadn't thought about moving into politics. I figured I was still going to be in the military for another 20 years. But that's when I started thinking about doing it, not as, what exactly can I do in state, local, federal government, just more so my job is defending my country. That's whether the military wants me to clean a toilet or disarm a bomb or surreptitiously unlock a door or go respond to some nuclear threat somewhere or whatever it might be. My job is defending my country as a part of my military. How do I replicate defending my country? And that's where I said, all right, this is my new battlefield if I can have that opportunity.
Love it. And I love how you draw inspiration from your family too, because I do the same thing as a father. It's like I look at my kids and it's like the one thing I want them to see is the witness of excellence. Like I want them to see me doing something great. And I want to be an inspiration for them.
Yeah. God, country, family. I can tell you that. For me, absolutely made a difference in who I am today. My faith, my country that I came home to, and the way that my country treated me, and the way that my family treated me, encouraged me, helped me out, and by that extended family as well, right? Your best friends, parents, and things like that. Those people that you chalk up as family. But to go to your point about your parents, and you and I can probably attest to the fact that we looked at our parents. I can remember to this day. My father, back when people had what they called church money in their pocket, change, that kind of thing. I can remember going to the grocery store and my dad figuring out that the cashier gave him one too many quarters or a couple too many quarters, he'd turn around, drive back to the grocery store and make sure that cashier got back her, her 50 cents, her 75 cents. And that was something that I witnessed. And that level of honesty embedded itself in me to say, okay, I saw my dad do that. I got to make sure that my kids see that I do the right thing.
Yep. 100%. I love it. Let's talk about what do you consider to be the most pressing local issue facing the district?
So, you go back to when I was first elected, the biggest local issue that we faced was water, right? We are a waterborne community. We have canals going up and down, north and south, throughout all of Florida. We have coastline for basically the entire breadth of the district that I represent. We have intercoastal waterway for the entire breadth. We have people that are in fishing and maritime and restaurants on the water. And we had a community that was being devastated by toxic algae blooms coming out of Lake Okeechobee and poisoning the Lake Worth Lagoon, the Indian River Lagoon, across the state, the ｃｈljljΧ and those in Naples, Sanibel, Fort Myers area, just our state getting decimated by this. And hands down, it's still an issue that affects us, but it was the biggest issue then. Right now, we're dealing really, I think, in a time of government where it's not just that. There are massive federal issues that are going on, from weaponization of government against people that attend school board meetings to the Internal Revenue Service to what people see happening with people in, and family members in federal office, whether the Trump family or the Biden family or other people in between. There are massive federal political issues that are probably keeping people up more at night than a lot of the local issues.
Yeah, 100%. So, but the local issue, I know you've been fighting the LACO thing for a while, and it seems like it's been getting better. But what is the current status on the Lake Okeechobee, like the discharges, and what's the end in sight?
So how do you fight a system where you have I want to say it's about the 7th largest lake in the nation, sitting in the middle of Florida, that it's kept artificially high for the purpose of storing water largely for agriculture. And then when it gets too high in the summer times, because that's when hurricanes come and major rainstorms and major rain systems, the lake fills up too high. And so the system was created to say, well, if the lake fills up too much, who cares? We'll just dump that water out the East Coast and out the West Coast of Florida. No big deal, right? And that went on for decades and decades to the detriment of the coasts. And so I came in and as Congress saying, well, how do we fix this? Well, number one, if we know every year that we get a lot of rain in the summer, how about you just take the lake lower as it gets closer to summer so that you got more buffer, more room in that lake to store all the rains that are coming. That has been very successful. There was infrastructure that needed to be rebuilt because there was a failing dike all the way around Lake Okeechobee. The Corps of Engineers had to fix it. It was getting dollars to repair that failing dike. That's essentially been repaired. It's, not everything in government has to cost money. Sometimes it's just management strategies, telling the Corps of Engineers that controls the water levels on Lake Okeechobee where, when, how much water they can store, where they have to discharge it to. That fight for me on water in my office is literally, it is a day-to-day fight where we are talking to the agency saying, why aren't you putting 500 cubic feet per second this way because it's available? Why aren't you moving 200 cubic feet per second over here? Why are you storing this? Every time, just basically staying up their tail about why they are or are not doing something so that there's not a situation that we get to where they have to dump toxic blue-green algae blooms onto our coastal waterways. And I'll give you one other quick point on this. It's unnatural. So these algal blooms that are as green as this beautiful Florida sign that you have there, but that's as green as they are. They're as thick as guacamole. They stink to high hell. Your eyes will water if you're around them. Your clothes will reek of them. If you're around them for 15, 20 minutes, it will be coming out of your pores until you take a shower that night. They're literally toxic. So when you have those kind of situations of that, you have to get the federal government to acknowledge that it's toxic. You have to realize that it's fresh water. And what do we have on our coastline? Fresh or salt water?
Salt.
It's salt, right? So this water doesn't even belong over there, but we get situations where they dump so much fresh water from Lake Okeechobee into our coastlines that some years you've actually had the waves that are breaking on the Atlantic coastline measuring as fresh water. They're dumping that much fresh water. Jeez. Totally unnatural, killing seagrasses, killing oyster beds, just destroying it.
So the fight is against the ag companies?
That's a part of it. It's a part of it because they get consumptive use permits to use hundreds of billions of gallons of water. And as a result of that, that's why the Corps of Engineers and the state agency, the South Florida Water Management District, they control these consumptive use permits and they keep the lake at an artificially high level to meet those demands. But then, like I said, you get to summertime, they kept it artificially high. There's no more room to absorb the rainwater coming in. And so they say, okay, let's screw the east and the west coast of Florida and dump that fresh water out there, even though they're saltwater coastal estuaries.
But then you passed the act that they have to abide by the plan, right? The plan.
So we passed a bill that said they have to develop a new plan of attack, right? So they have a book, a manual that says where, when, how much water they can send in any direction, how much they can store in there, everything having to do with it. If there's a storm on the horizon and the lake is at this level, or if there's been no rain and the lake is at this level. I mean, it manages every bit of it. We said, the management plan that you have right now, it screws the Florida Everglades, it screws the Sanibel, Fort Myers, Naples area, and it screws the east coast of Florida. Everybody's getting messed up by this. You need to come up with a new management plan because you can't destroy everybody just so you can benefit the agriculture industry and make sure they have the water that they want. And I'll bring you a point here. It's not, there's water needs, right? There's municipal water supply. City of West Palm Beach needs water. And to give you a fine point on just how much water they get, the city of West Palm Beach gets about 1/55th, let's say, of the amount of water supply that agriculture gets for the area. So you look at that and you have sometimes people in government that will say, no, you can't lower the levels of this lake because the city needs the water. They're playing politics, right? If they really wanted more water, they could take 1/55th of the water supply for agriculture and they would literally double the supply that the city of West Palm Beach has. But you don't see them doing that because most people don't have the stones to go up against the agriculture industry and the way that they're demanding that the system be skewed for them and screw everybody else.
Wow, what a battle.
It is a battle.
Jeez, but it's an important one. So let's pivot into housing. I was reading a statistic the other day. Fewer than 12% of the country's estimated 24 million veterans are currently using their VA loan benefits. According to government data, many service members don't think they can qualify for a VA loan and aren't sure how to pursue one. I mean, you and I both know that this is one of the greatest benefits a veteran can receive. I mean, the VA loan, you can literally buy a property with no money out of pocket, control an asset. Over time, the national appreciation is about 5%. So on a $500,000 house, you're talking $25,000 in a year in wealth creation just from appreciation alone.
Yep. It goes beyond that, right? You could talk about things like title insurance, other things, benefits that you get by utilizing a VA loan specifically. So great program. I've used the VA home loan program to purchase my house. There's been some ways that we've actually tried to work to adjust it in a bill upcoming, which is the Farm Bill. And one of the things that is unfortunate for veterans, many veterans want to get into agriculture, farming, other things like that, have family farms, things like that. They can't use the home loan benefits, the veteran home loan benefits, just to buy something that is considered a farm or farmland or things like that, which is unfortunate because that's essentially a homestead opportunity for them. Right. They can produce, they can bring things to market, and they can also have a home, and if that's how they want to find their purpose. So that's been one of the things that I've been working to change in Congress. Obviously, you see inflating prices in the value of homes. You see the need to, with interest rates, what people can get for their dollar, is changing. So There's been efforts to make the amount that people can borrow through the Veterans Home Loan increase, just given the way that housing prices have gone up. So there's a lot going on with VA home loans. Veterans need to look at it. They need to utilize it. It's one of the best benefits that exists out there.
Yeah, 100%. The question is like, how do you get the word out and how do you reach more veterans and let them know about the VA benefits? VA loan?
You make sure that people that utilize it tell those veterans the benefit of utilizing it. And if somebody served their country or is in the National Guard or reserves, make sure that they speak to people that are in their sphere saying, hey, how do you use this as a current member of the Guard? How do you use this as a current member of the Army Reserves? How do you use this as a retired member? Who are the best people that know all the details on that you can work through? Because I can tell you, and you didn't pay me to say this. You and I have a relationship because, my realtor that I had recommended you as somebody to use, and that's ultimately how we found each other, and then, developed a relationship working together. So, you haven't told me or anything to say this, but I've spoken with mortgage brokers that just were not familiar with utilizing VA benefits and the ways to best utilize it. And I've worked with you, and there was hands down a difference. There's a reason that I work with you, and that's because you've made yourself an expert in your craft, or at least I can speak to your craft in terms of working with veterans home loans, and that made it advantageous for me to work with you. But there's a difference between brokers. That's a reality, and you didn't pay me to say that. It's just the truth of my experience.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but it is the best loan. And for some lenders to not offer it just because they don't know about it, or maybe they don't make as much money on it, or whatever the case is, it's really a disservice to the veterans. And a lot of times too is that veterans do get blocked from the real estate community because a lot of listing agents will be like, we're not accepting VA loans. So most of the time, and I actually remember the last property that you bought, I had to call, they didn't have VA listed on the listing agreement. I had to call the listing agent and be like, listen, we're doing a VA loan. VA loans don't have a loan amount cap anymore, which is great. They also don't have like the stigma they used to have. Like back in the day, like the VA would like nitpick. If you have a crack on the sidewalk, had to be fixed. Like any little hole in the wall had to be fixed. Now it's not that bad. It's, generally speaking, it's pretty easy to do.
Exactly what you're talking about. I was speaking with two of my friends, Tara and Karen, and they deal in this world as well. They're a Gold Star family. They lost one of their loved, their son and brother in service to our country. And we were talking about this very issue where, unfortunately, you have a situation where people should be lining up to take VA home loans, where in many cases you have people saying, we don't want to take them, right? We don't want to have to go through the appraisal process, or just the level of due diligence that the VA is going to require to have that loan go through, where that you're serving a veteran. This is a way to help the veteran community, and to have that be put on the back burner by some is actually disgusting, in part the way that can take place in some situations.
I agree. Another thing too is something I want to talk to you about was right now we have an affordability issue in Palm Beach County, Martin, St. Lucie, where a lot of people, it's just hard to find a house you can afford. Well, if you think about it, the lowest price homes are typically condos. The problem is the VA, to get a condo approved VA is nearly impossible. So there's over 1,000 condos like in Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie. Guess how many are approved VA?
Give me a number.
10 in Palm Beach, 4 in Martin.
Really?
0 in St. Lucie.
You're giving me something to work on right now. This is not an issue that I've heard about before. Somebody telling me that the condos are not being approved for that. So my staff will definitely make note of it. And as soon as we get done with this, we'll start digging into as to why that is. But you bring it up and you see it as such an obvious issue because, okay, South Florida lifestyle, right? Which can mean a lot to a lot of different people. Maybe you want to be in a neighborhood with a lake in the middle. Maybe you want to be in a townhome. Maybe you want to be in a condo, which many of our condos are direct waterfront properties, right? They're oceanfront or they're intercoastal front. They're in more urban areas, so you want to be close to downtown, wherever. maybe that's the lifestyle that you want to choose. And to have that denied when you served your country as part of the loan process, that, again, that seems to me as something that's not above board. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm going to go look into that when we're done.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As a lender, basically the way it works is like if a veteran wants to buy a condo, it takes about 60 days for it to get approved through the VA. It's a mountain of paperwork, and usually at the last minute they don't allow it to go through.
And if somebody's buying something, right, they might say, "Oh, I want a 30-day closing." I need 60 days just to go through due diligence.
Right. Yeah. You'd have to be like 60 to 90 days to go VA. So most people then will choose to go conventional. Mm-hmm. Now, in the conventional loan, you have like two options. You can do a full review or limited review. It's super easy. Lenders do it in-house. So you instead of the VA doing it, you trust the lender to do it. And we do it. I mean, how many Fannie Mae approved condos are in Palm Beach County? Probably at least 400 plus. But it gives a lot of opportunity, and a lot of people that are buying these condos it's 55 and older. Maybe it's a couple $100,000. Like, where are you going to find a house for $200,000? It's either mobile home or condo.
But it's not a bad quality of life, right?
It's not.
You don't have to have a lawnmower, because there's probably a maintenance crew. You probably have a pool or, something like that for the family. It's a lifestyle that's for some. But if you're part of the sum that's for, that shouldn't be denied from you. You brought up something, I don't know how many things are on your list, but this is something else that we were dealing with mortgage. And that is, I had somebody bring it to my attention that, unfortunately, this person's going through a divorce, as many people do. And in going through a divorce, he's getting kicked in the crotch, lawyer fees and things like that. Yep. And basically they shared a home. Both their names were on the title. And now, as a result of going through the divorce, to take one person off of it, they were going to have to refinance the entire thing. And so this is something that at one point I brought in Fannie and Freddie into the office to have them explain to me, why does this have to take place? When their people are getting kicked, why are we going to kick them while they're down already? And, it makes sense that you have to evaluate somebody's qualifications as somebody that's borrowing. But now, you do have this different situation where a couple of years ago, if somebody was refinancing, they were probably going to a lower rate. Right. Now, if somebody's refinancing, they're probably going from 2 or 3%. And they might have to get a 7% rate. So for this guy, he was looking at his payment, I don't know, doubling or whatever the amount was. And it's an issue where if Fannie and Freddie owns that loan, it's something that if they're going through a divorce, we can look into that and try to say there are options where you shouldn't have to, as long as they can review your portfolio and decide that you as an individual that will be on the loan is still a worthy credit profile borrower, whatever the terminology for that would be, that they don't have to, shouldn't have to necessarily change your rate if you're going through that. So it's another important thing to bring up.
Oh, for sure. So, just to do a modification.
Yeah.
I mean, it's simple. Yeah. Modify. As long as they qualify.
See, the terminology. You're a mortgage broker. You could have just said, Brian, modification. Just say modification.
That's it. It's simple. So, are there any other, are there any things that can be done at a federal level for housing affordability? I mean, I know from the state level, DeSantis rolled out this program in July with a new budget called Hometown Heroes. And what it did is it provided up to $35,000 for people to buy their first home. It was funded with 1.2 billion. How much was it? 120 million. Yeah. So $120 million came out July 1st, 2 months completely gone. But it was like a down payment assistance it was just to promote first-time home buyers. Great program. Is there anything that can be done at a federal level to promote homeownership or affordable homeownership? Yes and no.
And so this is not going to be a conversation in terms of just the specific, can the federal government make the price of a home come down? No, it's privately owned, right? Or it's owned by a bank, maybe if it was a bank-owned property. And an individual can ask to, sell it, and somebody can offer to buy it for whatever prices that they want. So, and we're speaking largely to Floridians, right? Because we're in Florida and we have a lot of people moving down here. Basic laws of economics of supply and demand. But here's where the federal government, I think, can make a difference. And this is much more of a political conversation. There's a lot of things that go on with owning a home. What's the cost of gas that's going into your home? What's the cost of the air conditioning or the electric bill for your home? What are the interest rates that you're allowed to get for your home? And the list goes on and on for those things. Those things, insurance. Largely, homeowners insurance is controlled at the state level. Yeah. But when you talk about flood insurance and things like that, there's been an effort to reform flood insurance program at the federal level since I've been in Congress. There have been some minor reforms. There's efforts for major reforms, but like people see in Washington, there's gridlock and it continually gets held up. That's a place where if you can reform flood insurance and help to bring those costs down, you're making for a more affordable home because people have more disposable income to put into their mortgage instead of having to put it into flood insurance or wind insurance or things like that. There have to be major things done in the state to address, your insurance on your home. I've lost my home insurance right at the very beginning of hurricane season a year or two ago. And, I don't think that was by any means an accident in timing. They were happy to take my money for the entire year. And then right before hurricane season hits, hey, we're canceling your policy. Go out and get a policy somewhere else whereby they reduce their risk. That's total BS, if you ask me. That can be done. So policies have to be taken at the federal level to say, in my opinion, I don't like to see the prime rate going through the roof at the fastest possible rate and making it so that if somebody has to put gas on a credit card or groceries on a credit card, that they're going to have to pay that much more. That affects what they can put into their mortgage and, likewise, everything else that the executive branch, the Biden administration, I think they're directly a result for a huge amount of the inflation policies. I don't know how hyper political you want to get on here, but I will point the finger just like all those stickers that were on the gas pumps with Joe Biden pointing at the pump saying, I did that. Yeah, they chose to undertake policies that said, we want to eliminate oil and gas leases in the United States of America. We don't want to see pipelines that come in from Canada. We want to do things that make things more expensive in America. That affects Americans.
Yep. I agree. People are choking out. I mean, as a mortgage lender, those are things we don't even look at in qualification. Like we don't look at gas and utilities. Like we don't add all that stuff in, even though it's way higher than it used to be.
Sure.
But we don't use that as part of the qualification. And we go off of like gross income, not net income. So if you think about it, really what people can afford is probably much lower than even what we're able to get them right now.
But the responsible buyer looking to say, all right, what can I afford? They got to look at that.
Yep.
I assume.
What's the biggest problem that you're seeing in the veteran community today, and how can our local community get involved to help?
So, we deal with a host of things in the veteran community. We deal with veteran suicide. I've lost friends to their own hand. I have friends that have attempted to take their life unsuccessfully. I don't have my phone in front of me. I set it on the table over there, and I don't want it. But, I could read you texts of people, that text me or their family members call into our office saying, can you talk to my son? Can you talk to my daughter? Can you talk to whatever? Where these texts are like, I feel worthless. I feel like I'm never going to be what I was before. I feel this, and just text after text of people struggling with what is their worth to the world now and to their family and to other things. It's a big problem in the veteran community. Veterans issues in terms of healthcare. We have a VA hospital right down the road from where we're sitting here right now. And a lot of times these VA hospitals, they go woefully understaffed. Like a lot of places, they just can't find the manpower to do it. The VA hospitals are the same way. So I'll give you a couple of things that I'm working on to address both of those issues: staffing in the VA and healthcare, and also veteran suicide. So one of the things that I want to see to address veteran suicide in part, and I'm not saying that there's a silver bullet to this. I don't think there is. I'm just telling you stuff from my experience as a veteran. So when I got out of the military, my unit and friends, they did a retirement ceremony for me that, and I'm saying this literally, it was as though the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the military was retiring from the military. I was Staff Sergeant Nobody. I served my country honorably, and I loved it, and I was proud of it. But I was a Staff Sergeant in the Army, and There was a 4-star general that spoke at it. It was in a very secure place that only unit members were usually allowed to get onto. My family and friends were invited on there, and they were allowed to see, to their benefit, not just to mine, people thanking me for what I did. Now, I could talk about that much more in length, but I just want to say that in so far as to say, every person that's separating honorably from the military, in my opinion, should be celebrated the same way as the day that they're celebrating when they're going in. When you're entering the military, you're putting your hand on a Bible, you're raising your right hand, you're taking an oath to support and defend the Constitution. You're being celebrated. There's a ceremony to that. You're being given your uniforms and other things. The day people are walking out of the military, in my opinion, they should be given their first suit. So that the military is saying, here, pick the suit that you want, the tie that you want. Good luck on your job interview in the civilian world for whatever it is that you're going to go out there and do. Everybody's going to have a retirement ceremony in part, whether that is once or twice a month on every parade field in the military where they're celebrating in mass all of the people that are separating from the military or whatever it is. But so their families can see how proud their country is of their service, because it's important for the families to see the worth of the individuals as well. And on that parade field where people are being celebrated when they exit, I think that there should be, just like you take an oath when you enter the military, there should be an oath when you exit the military. I call it an oath of exit, where you pledge to continue to maintain yourself, physically and mentally, and continue to be a keeper of your brothers and sisters in arms, just like you're going to be a keeper of yourself. Make that oath, because, in the military, and I don't know how much time we have here, but in the military, we put into words the things that are most important to us. The Ranger Creed, the SF Creed, the Soldier's Creed. I'm a warrior, physically and mentally tough. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. You put into words the things that you are all about as members of the military. So in my opinion, as you're exiting the military, an oath makes perfect sense to say what you will continue to do. And if you are indeed an individual of honor, as you say you are as a member of the military, then you will uphold that oath. So that's a little bit about what I think we could be doing. I don't think it's a silver bullet, but I do think it would make a difference in terms of veteran suicide. Switching to what I think we could do for veterans healthcare. I mentioned already, I recovered at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. When I went through that recovery, that hospital, which is the largest military hospital, it's not just military personnel there in uniform providing the medical care, and it's not just civilians like at Good Samaritan or Jupiter Medical or Cleveland Clinic or somewhere else like we have around here. Yep. It is a combination of military and civilians. Our VA hospitals are just civilians. So in my opinion, we should open up these VA hospitals to be postings, duty stations for military, Guard, Reserve, active duty, medical personnel to go in there and be doctors, be nurses, be dental hygienists, be optometrists. Go in there and you could have an 06, right, a colonel level person go in there and be the next director of the West Palm Beach VA hospital, which would do a number of things. Number one, it fills those vacancies in there with people that are going to be veterans someday, so have a very high level interest in making sure it's run at the highest level. If that colonel goes in there and becomes the next director of the West Palm Beach VA, well, if they want to put a star on their chest as a general in the future, they'd better make sure that that VA is run damn well, or they're never going to become the next general like they want to become. Or if they plan on exiting the military after that, they have experience running a hospital, so they could go out there and have that experience and go become somebody that runs a hospital in the civilian world, right? I think there's a number of things that you would garner by making our VA hospitals places that are run like Walter Reed Medical Center, both joint military and civilian, to make it a better place. So there's a couple of ideas.
What's it going to take to do that?
So what does it take to do that or affect flood insurance or anything else, right? Any of these things? You have 435 members of the House of Representatives, which is a bicameral, 1/3 body of the federal government, right? You have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And so then you have 100 members of the Senate, and then you have the president. And so you have to get things through the House, get things through the Senate, and get it across the president's desk. And that is never, ever a small feat.
I can't imagine. Couple other questions, and then we're going to wrap up. I got a couple rapid fires for you.
Yeah, fire away.
Actually, the last thing I was reading this article, the Florida Daily, four Florida congressmen honored for efforts to end experiments on animals.
Yeah.
I mean, I was reading this. I mean, is this right? This is so crazy.
Your
$20 billion in reckless government spending on cruel, dangerous, and wasteful experiments on dogs, cats, and other animals abroad in places like Wuhan in Russia. $20 billion?
Yeah.
Is that
and that's just
billion?
What's uncovered, right? So I always when I go into high schools and things like this, I always ask them this question. I say, how many government dollars are there? And they all throw out different answers. 1 trillion, 1 billion, this many. They throw out numbers. I'm like, wrong. There's no government dollars. Everything is dollars of we the people. Every dollar that the federal government doesn't have a factory where they bring something to market, they produce something and they bring it to market and they raise the GDP of the United States of America. They don't do that. Every dollar comes out of your pocket, my pocket, somebody that got up this morning at 5 a.m. and got ready for work's pocket, comes out of somebody's pocket. And so for every dollar that's spent, people should ask themselves and say, you should have a say-so about what's that spent on. Do you want your money spent on painful testing on dogs or cats? And if the answer is no, then you should talk to your representative about it. It's something that I do a great deal of work on. I work with groups like one of them is called White Coat Waste. I do a lot of work with, and it's try to uncover where there is animal testing going on paid for by the federal government. This has taken place within the Department of Veterans Affairs. It takes place in the military. It takes place within the Food and Drug Administration. If you don't know this, Beagle is the most common dog that is tested on. And there are laboratories that are as big as warehouses. All they do is breed and raise beagles that will spend their entire life in captivity in a cage. And, from the time that they're, newly born, to do nothing other than perform tests on them. And then even if they're fine after their tests are completed, they will euthanize the animals. They won't allow them to be adopted out in most cases and things like that. They'll euthanize them, kill them, and just raise the next crop of dogs, cats, whatever to be tested on. So I don't think that is an appropriate use of the dollars of we the people, and I try to root that out wherever I can.
Yeah, root it out. Let's take the $20 billion and give it to veterans to help buy more homes.
Or just don't take it from the people to begin with.
Yeah. Jeez. All right, a couple rapid fire questions for you. Favorite business book?
Let's see. I like books about the 20-mile march, and when you look at some of the great people out there, Tony Robbins being one of them. I look at the inspirational books as business books because they go out there and they tell you how to take yourself and apply it to whatever it is that you're doing. Strengthen yourself, your business is going to be better. So that's probably one of my favorite ideas that I've taken out of business books, and that is the ideal of the 20-mile march, which applied to me as a military guy. When we're doing a ruck march, we don't do it over the course of a sprint, right? It's one step at a time, step for 20 miles, and that's the way that you approach other things. Just consistent, pedantic drum beat, grinding it out and continuing to build and grow.
That's life. Worst part of your job?
There's not a worst part about it. There is dishonesty that you see. I've given this example many times, and this goes very much to politics. There is always on the floor of the House, Republicans, Democrats, whatever, people that will go out there and say, you're the worst, you hate dogs, you hate cats, you hate the environment, you hate women, children, this, that, right? Both sides have their things that they'll point to the other side and say, you're the worst for this. And then I see it all the time where people walk off the floor of the House after saying something like that, and then they'll get into the elevator with people of the other side. They'll get into the elevator with me, and right after they said something like that, they'll be like, hey, Brian, how's it going? How's your wife? when's she coming to Washington again? How are your kids? When are you gonna bring those kids out on the floor? I've got this piece of legislation. Would you sign on to this piece of legislation? And the point that I'm making is one of those situations that happen within moments of each other is not true. Either what you said on, to the world about me just now is not true, because that can't be true if you just step in the elevator with me and you're speaking all nice to me. Or you really don't care about seeing my wife and kids or about me getting on your bill if you really think that about me, right? I don't care which one is true. I really don't care. But be honest to what is really true. That part bugs me. But I'll say this about the job, the work of being a member of Congress. For me, it's like being a member of the military. I loved being in the Army. I loved being a bomb technician. Does that mean that I loved every minute? Absolutely not. I saw friends perish, killed in action. It wasn't fun always. Sometimes I didn't mind being shot at. Sometimes I didn't like it, right? I didn't like being blown up. I don't have any regrets, but doesn't mean that I physically, enjoyed it, right? It wasn't a good time by the classical sense of the term. But all of those things that were unpleasant about service like that, whenever you would get to mission accomplished, you would forget about a lot of it. I never forget about my friends that I lost, but I would forget about the blisters on my feet after we got to mission accomplished. I know that I had blisters, but do I remember to this day what it was like because we, trudged 25 miles across the mountains of Afghanistan to get from A to B and conduct this mission? No, I knew that my feet hurt, but I don't really remember it to this day. But I remember that we got the mission accomplished. And that's how Congress is, right? You get blisters on your feet, so to say, no pun intended. But when you get to mission accomplished, you forget about the blisters and you're left with the purpose.
Nice. Love it. What's your favorite part of the job?
Mission accomplished. Getting to mission accomplished. Serving we the people. I have an opportunity to, for a window of time, be a part of our elected government and represent we the people. All power that government has, if you can call it power, comes from the consent and the authority of we the people. Government has no power but for what the people give them. And so it's an honor to be able to do it. And for the window that I can, I thank my community for allowing me to do it.
That's awesome. Lunch with one person, dead or alive?
One person, dead or alive. Right now, let's say alive, I've met Elon Musk, but I've never had the opportunity to just sit down and chat with him. I'm sure he's a common one. So I'd love to, sit down and just have some conversation, maybe a lunch over pizza or something with Elon Musk. Let's pick one person dead. General Patton. I love General Patton. I'm such a fan of his speeches that he's given, his speech to the Third Army, and Reagan too. Reagan gave some great speeches as well. Would love to sit down and chat with him. But think about Reagan's speech to the Third Army. I think America needs to go back and hear it. Watch the first couple minutes of the Patton movie. He talks about, Americans love a winner. We hate a loser. To Americans, the idea of losing is hateful. He can't stand the idea of somebody that loses and laughs about it, because that's not who we are, right? We love the championship boxer, the big league baseball player. Like, we love winners, and we strive to be winners. And we live in a time today where you get a lot of people that are trying to chastise people for pushing to make winners and making it seem like losing is just another thing that's okay, and okay to even celebrate. And that's just not the case. I don't agree with it. So, yep. Patton.
Love it.
America needs more Patton today.
Local charity that you really appreciate?
Operation 300, great local charity. I spoke about two family members that are a part of Operation 300 earlier. They lost their son and their brother. His name was Aaron Vaughn. He was killed in a helicopter crash known as Extortion 17. Was the largest single incident of the loss of Navy SEALs in our military history in this helicopter crash. And I know a number of the members of the family. They're a great family, but out of the pain of that tragedy, they found healing and have affected people across the country, maybe even across the globe, they started a camp for the family, the sons and daughters of the fallen. and they do it right in Martin County. And they bring kids in, throughout the year. Each kid will have somebody that goes out there, basically a big brother, big sister kind of thing, that goes out there and spends time with them, teaches them things, answers questions for them. The parent that remains will go and have some respite time while the kids are at camp, and they have been able to make a difference in the lives of children of the fallen. And I couldn't even begin to quantify the amount of difference that they've made. You'd have to put it at a term as priceless.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great organization. Favorite hobby?
Whatever my kids want to do, right? So
that's my life too.
If it put right up to the point, I don't want to turn my kids into, spoiled, self-centered brats, but as parents, right? Like, I want to make them strong, but I want to do, what can we do to put a smile on their face? I love to play catch with my boys. I love to push trucks with my youngest 4-year-old boy. If my daughter wants to have a tea party or, play with her dolls or something like that, I'll sit there and do that with her. Although I'll try to get her to play catch with me or hit baseballs off the tee or throw a football or stuff like that. Whatever it is they want to do. Favorite hobby is whatever my kids want to do in the moment, and just get a smile on their face and make some memories.
Absolutely. Best advice you ever got?
From my father. And I spoke about it briefly already. And it was when I was laying in a hospital bed. My father came to my bedside, my dad and I, and I didn't tell the story in this way, but this is how it happened. My dad and I, we love each other. My father's 93, and, still very with it, still will climb on the roof of his house to clean his gutters, stuff like that. And so he comes to my bedside, and as much as we love each other, we're just not those two guys that go around saying that we love each other. We just don't do it. Right. And so he comes to my bedside. He's, as he typically is, he's in a blazer, and he's tearful. His son is laying there in a hospital bed, short of 2 legs and a finger and half my arm. And, he looks at me and he tells me that he loves me. He's proud of me. He's glad that I'm okay, that I'm alive, right? And then it goes back to tough love right after that. And he looks at me very seriously, and he says what I said earlier. He said, Brian, you can't let this keep you down. You got to find a way to pull yourself up, to get yourself out there, to get back to work. You can't let your kids see you sitting on your butt regardless of what happens to you in life, because your kids are always looking at you to see how to live their life. So, and that's where he went into saying, if your job is defending your country, then make sure the best defense isn't in your past, right? Make sure the best example you give your kids is not in your past. So, best advice.
Oh, that's a great note to end on. Brian, I know you have a busy schedule. Thank you so much for coming in today.
I was glad to speak with you. I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate the work that you do, and I was glad to sit here with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, good to talk to you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.